Fergus. I'm head brewer here at Adnams. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the beers we make while you've got plenty of time in your hands. So a little bit more detail than the normal quick 5-second sort of tasting notes. So beer we're going to talk about now is Southwold Bitter. So Southwold Bitter in bottle is 4.1, so it's a little bit higher than the cask version, which is 3.7, but essentially the same recipe, just a little bit more in for the bottle version, just to give it a bit more body. So the beer was originally called Best Bitter. I guess like every other brewer around the country, it was called Best Bitter. We changed the name, I guess about 15 years ago to The Bitter, and then about 10 years ago we probably changed it back to Southwold Bitter, which is what it's called today. So Southwold Bitter is brewed with lots of pale ale malt, so it's all local malt. So we're very blessed, I guess, from where we're situated. We're surrounded by fields of barley and wheat, and lots of malting companies are based here as well. So it's very easy for us to say we buy local, but we do, and we make sure that the farmers know from year to year that they're growing for us. So we have a bit of connection to where it's grown, and we go for the usual barley walks to make sure that the crop is looking like what we want it to be, but also to learn the complications, the challenges that the growers have from year to year. So lots of really good English pale ale malt, and then we also combine that with lots of English hops, really. So hops called Fuggles and Goldings, and Fuggles is probably the key one for this particular beer. Goldings do a lot of the sort of bitterness work, but the aroma and the flavour tend to come more from the Fuggle side. So we put lots of Fuggles in towards the end of the boil, so we get a lot of grassy herbal notes, which is really what we're looking for from Fuggles. Maybe a little bit of sort of floralness as well from time to time, but it's really that grassy and that sort of herbal note, really. So when you drink Southwold Bitter, which I'm just about to do. So you should get a little bit of sweetness on the nose. So we do use a little bit of crystal malt in here as well, just to give it a little bit of lift from the sort of sweetness of the crystal malt. But we don't want it to be too toffee. We just want to balance really of the herbal note from the Fuggles. So you get a little bit of the toffee, and then you should get that herbal note coming through. And then on the palate, you should find it's quite tanniny, almost like a cold tea really at the end. And that's what we're looking for really from this beer. We want it to have that sort of slight cold tea tannin notes to it. And it's quite a I suppose a change from the usual citrus hops that you sort of see now. Obviously this was the norm once upon a time, and of its type, I think Southwold Bitter is a classic really. It's a classic English ale, and classic English bitter, which you don't see so much of anymore. In some ways, it's sort of quite a grown-up palate, so it doesn't have that doesn't play to those cues of sort of citrus and grapefruit and all those other things that we talk about in lots of other beers. This is an English style ale, which is classically herbal, classically tannin sort of led. You also get lots of the sort of Adnams yeast profile. So for most of our beers, we use our own house yeast. For a few, we use a different yeast strain because we don't want the particular characteristics that our yeast will make in that beer. But actually, this is probably one of the best examples of what our yeast does in a beer. It adds a sort of spicy note that sort of is pretty subtle in the background, and we wouldn't talk about it sort of in normal tasting terms, but actually it's key to tying the sort of the flavors of this beer together. Just that spicy note from the beer or from the yeast. Anyway, that's Southwold Bitter. Cheers.